So the rare earths were always there, but just not in any sort of level of abundance that got us excited earlier on until WA1 made their discovery.
Hello and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. Please note, topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial or investment advice. Gary Harvey is the Managing Director of Rincon Resources, which is listed on the ASX under code RCR. Rincon Resources is a junior explorer focused on copper, gold, and recently rare earths and other critical battery metals. It's focused on WA currently, and Gary discussed the historical exploration in the area and why it's so exciting for Rincon Resources. Given the success of WA1, Gary highlighted some of the similarities they can see with their projects and what investors can expect. The company completed an oversubscribed capital raising recently, and Gary talked about what the funds are going to be used for and who is a part of the team. Here is Gary Harvey.
So hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull podcast. Joining me in the studio today is Gary Harvey, the Managing Director of Rincon Resources, which is listed on the ASX under code RCR. It's got three highly prospective areas that they're exploring for copper, gold, and as we're going to talk about, a little bit of rare earths as well, which is quite exciting. It's a first time MD role for yourself, Gary, but I can imagine you've done a fair bit in your history and your lead up to this. So for listeners that aren't familiar with yourself, being your first time on a podcast as well, what is your story and history?
Well, Ben, thanks for having me. This is all a first, so and a little bit exciting and nervous at the same time. So look, I'm a geologist by background and graduated from RMIT in 94 and went straight into the exploration side of the industry. I started in an office in Melbourne, but then quickly went to the goldfields north of Laverton in a project area called Duketon, and I was there for 3 years as an exploration geologist, junior exploration geologist, and look, that was my grounding, and as you know, people may know that the whole Duketon area is now Rincon Resources and they're mining multi-millions of ounces. From there, I then went to a smaller company called Forestania Gold and did a lot of regional grassroots type exploration. And so that got me familiar with that area of the industry. And, just started doing a lot of reconnaissance work. So learned how to map, understand the basics of geology, what to look for, where to go, and then, how would you test something with limited funds. And so that was all put together, and then I eventually found myself on a mine site, fly in, fly out, which was great, but very bureaucratic. Didn't like it. I don't really like working in those environments, so I stuck to the pure exploration game, and found myself at a company called Rincon Resources, and had operations around the goldfields, particularly Coolgardie. I was there for 17 years. I started as a contract geologist, was put on the books as a exploration geo, went to senior, and then eventually fell into the exploration manager's role when funnily enough, the managing director at the time, who was also the exploration manager, resigned, and I stepped in and took the EM role with no real experience, but learnt as I went. I surrounded myself with good technical people and learnt the skills as I developed into a more senior exploration manager. And then really from Barra, came to Rincon when about 6 months, I think, or 4 months after Rincon IPO'd.
Yep.
And came in to get things going, run the show. And
that's the sort of
that's my
story
experience.
In a nutshell. Yeah, gotcha.
And so look, I've just obviously taken all those skills. I'm picking up the corporate side of the world as I go. I've got good board members around me who support me, and I continue to surround myself with technical people for mentoring, technical input, advice, all that kind of stuff to make sure that the decisions we make are the right decisions for the company.
Yeah, and I think that's a key, especially with junior exploration companies. You're really looking and evaluating land. That's the forefront. That is the mission, and trying to uncover potential resources to then take it down the track. And that sort of lends itself to someone that's got experience in that field, as opposed to you could say the further down the line developer that's more corporate and, as we said, like an engineer background, which sort of leads itself into project development and all that. But that's getting away from the point of what Rincon Resources is. So if you've never heard of the company and you're discussing what it is, I mean, what is Rincon Resources?
So look, Rincon Resources is a West Australian listed, registered company, and exploration focused. And, when we listed, we were strictly copper gold focused, and the projects were built together around that. But more recently, I guess, with some of the success that we've been seeing in the West Arunta region, and look, some of the mineralisation that we've even been getting in our own project, that we're started to shift towards adding rare earths, and that starts to take you down that sort of battery metals, future-facing metals sort of area. So really, we're sort of evolving into a copper, rare earths. We're probably likely to add lithium to the portfolio to balance that out. And gold will always probably be there in some respects. I mean, Telfer is a copper gold area. So there's always that's probably gold with copper, but very large deposits. So that's we're going to probably find a lot of copper there. And then West Arunta is an IACG, again copper gold. But obviously the opportunity for rare earths has risen,
significantly since probably a few years ago. Really,
we're embarking on investigating that as part of that project as well. So.
Yeah, because when I was looking at the website and doing research myself, the projects or the tenements and the areas that you've got have got quite a bit of, I guess, history and historical data and research already being done on it. And as we know, the looming EV transition and what we want as a society and just as the world leads itself to a lot of these materials really need to accelerate and come to the forefront. And you've got projects all throughout Western Australia. So if we're breaking down each of those, I mean, if we want to start with the South Telfer project, can we just discuss a little bit about, I guess, the history of the project and where it's located, just so listeners and viewers can get an understanding of whereabouts it is?
Sure. So South Telfer project is, as the name suggests, is close to the Telfer gold mine in the Patterson Range. That's the East Pilbara. I don't know if anyone knows where Telfer is, but it's quite a fair way out. I mean, if people know where Port Hedland is, Marble Bar, continue to go east.
Fair bit more.
Another, 300 odd kilometres from Marble Bar, and there's Telfer in the middle of the desert. And Telfer's a massive mine. It's world class, right? It's, I think their records or their site indicates it's produced in its entirety over 32 million ounces of gold, right? And a significant amount of tonnes of copper. So the region clearly has potential, maybe not to produce a 32 million ounce operation, but certainly multi-million ounce deposits. And we've seen that with recent discoveries at Havieron. Okay, that's it's up to 5.5 million ounces and a couple 100,000 tonnes in resource. And then Winu, which is quite similar. It's up near 6 million ounces of gold, but it's actually a copper deposit. It's got nearly 2.5 million tonnes of copper, right? And Rio Tinto are driving that. They obviously want to develop that. They see an opportunity to get a copper industry going on in the Pilbara or in that region. So our project is really exciting. We got a very large package of ground. It's over 550 square k's. And we have got the extension of the geology and the trends that host a lot of the mineralisation. At Telfer, we've got the extension to the southeast. All right? And we have about 35 kilometres, 30 kilometres of that extension. And funnily enough, from Telfer to our boundary is about 30 k's, 35 k's, and then we've got the additional 25 k's. Albeit, that trend and the geology starts to go undercover. So in the past, it's received quite little attention because of the level of cover. But Havron has demonstrated that, if your targets are valid,
sufficient enough,
the
there's
geology's
potential.
good, the structures are there, then it's worth having a crack testing those because, there could be 5.5 million ounces sitting underneath that cover, particularly on a trend that's produced over 32 million ounces of gold. So that's the big tick for us with this project. Not only that, but there's a parallel trend to the south of Telfer, which we refer to as our Hastie's Grace Trend. That's also got an abundance of mineralisation. It doesn't have any significant or major deposits on it yet, but we've got a prospect there called Hastie's. In fact, Hastie's is a domal type structure, just like Telfer. It's about 3.5 k's long, 1.2 k's wide in terms of surface area, but it's got scattered superficial anomalism at the surface, outcropping, around the perimeter of this dome. So Hastie's is fairly exciting for us, and that's where we started our show, right?
Yeah.
Our first program was at Hastie's.
Gotcha. And I mean, you're saying that there is a fair bit of activity and potential there. And I can imagine having this package clearly means there's going to be a fair bit of thought processing about how to allocate resources and start really expanding that and bringing news to investors. So, I mean, what are the plans really to sort of start developing, or, I mean, currently underway potentially, those projects there, and what really do you ambition or foresee happening over the next sort of period of time?
Yeah, look, we've spent a lot of time developing really good drill targets. As I said, we started at Hastie's because it's an outcropping system presented a very early opportunity to have a crack. And we did that, and there's more to be done at Hastie's.
Yep.
Okay, we've sort of stepped aside from Hastie's for the moment.
But you got to prioritise your spending and your drill
but
targets.
We'll probably get back to that at some stage. But and the reason also we did that is because we had to get in and get access to some of these other areas. And I referred to the continuation of Telfer's trend, right? Now that sits in a package of ground that we just simply couldn't physically get access to.
Yeah.
So the last couple of years it's been about developing access to get there. And we had to negotiate with Newcrest Mining to use their tracks to get in. And then it was all about negotiating heritage.
Yes.
Getting clearances, site clearances, and it took time.
Doesn't happen overnight, these things.
No, it doesn't. But we've done that. That's all done now, and now it's just about executing strategy, programs, and we will be drilling next week. We'll talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But that's been the play. So we've been trying to conserve money until we've got that access. But also continuing to push our Kiwikara project. Same thing. When I came to Rincon, there really had been no work done on getting access to the ground. And so quite quickly I had to negotiate land access agreement with the Jamu Jamu Native Title People group. Actually, it's the Kiwikara Native Title People. Jamu Jamu is the managing body.
Yes, yeah.
And we did that. And then there was another series of subsequent permits and approvals you had to get from the Department of Aboriginal Affairs and Department of Mayors to get permits and endorsements to actually set foot on the ground to start work. And we only achieved that in November last year. But since we've done that, we've got on the ground, we've done some mapping, sampling, we've developed targets, we've got more work to do. But again, we're now in a position to start drilling in a few months' time. And so in between all that, the journey has been about, okay, well, we've got great projects. We love them all. And we know this one, Telfer, has got a fantastic opportunity. We're learning and understanding more about Kiwikara. So there's an opportunity there. I mean, there's been recent, as you know, rare earth niobium discoveries up the road. So that's put a lot of focus and attention. So that's obviously meant, we need to get in the game quicker and that's going to happen. But then also, we've been looking at and reassessing our Laverton project. Okay, and we've when you talk about prioritising and where do we put our money, we've identified Laverton as probably not an area that we want to put too much more money into. So we're looking at opportunities, business transactions or whatever, to try and take Laverton out and maybe put in another project. And I mentioned earlier that lithium is probably a likely
complementary sort of project for it.
And that will complement the metals focus, copper, gold, rare earth, lithium, the battery high tech area that everywhere and everything seems to be going for obvious reasons. So that's essentially where we're at.
Yeah, no, it is. There's a fair bit happening, and you said there's a bit of drilling coming up, and that's always exciting because that really gets to, all the work leads up to the drilling, and then of course there's a lot more work in regards to analyse the results and then getting the package and announcing. And again, that's another process that doesn't happen overnight. But I mean, you mentioned there you've got some plans to do some drilling work. I mean, what's being involved in getting that to the point where it is now, and when can we really start expecting some more news flow about potentially those results and drilling programs?
Yeah, well, look, like I said, we've been really keen and eager to get into Mammoth. We identified Mammoth as a really exciting target. It's an intrusive related copper gold target, a bit like Havron. And we know there's a similar style deposit up the road called Ironclad, where there's mineralisation related to this dolerite intrusion. So that Mammoth is the same. And there's been some limited drilling there in the past, but that drilling indicated the presence of copper and gold around that target. But the target itself, where we'd like to drill, has never really been tested. Okay, and those areas are based on similar styles of structures and positions that we're seeing up the road at the Ironclad. And those positions, if you to transfer those positions as an analogy onto our target, have not been tested effectively. So we've actually got a drilling program starting in about a week and a half. Right? We've got earthworks, site works are starting next week, and that's going to take a bit of time. It involves putting in some sand dune crossings, and that's been one of the biggest challenges, is working with heritage native title groups to find points to cross a sand dune and then managing the disturbance of that sand dune, because they're quite important to the community, to put these tracks in and then put, you got to put special pads and stuff like that. So you
a lot of logistics involved in it. Yeah.
And so that's time consuming and expensive, but
has to be done in the right way.
It has to be done, and you don't just want to do it for any old target. You want to do it for special targets, and Mammoth is a special target. And so we've got a good program up to 3,000 metres planned. We won't. I can't see us drilling maybe all that 3,000 straight away. We're actually going to, every hole we'll be looking at and assessing and then deciding, okay, well, that hole was good. Let's go and drill the next one, and we'll prioritise, and we'll, if we can go up to 3,000, great. If the geology and what we're seeing says keep going, we'll keep going. But we'll do a minimum of 2 to start with, I think, and that gets a good test of the entire target area. And then we've got the option of continuing if it's all looking good, and I think it will. Past records have indicated similarities between some of the previous mineralisation in some old diamond holes that were recognised at Ironclad. So I'm fairly confident that
similarities
we should see the same stuff, and that's a real that's one of the reasons why we've got such confidence in this target, and that's why we're spending the money. So. Look, we Mammoth, we finished the heritage survey about a month and a half ago. We got the clearance a couple of weeks ago, and now we're just working on getting the equipment in to do the site works.
Very exciting.
Ready to go. It's
So a fair bit happening there, and of course, whilst that's happening, I can imagine there'll be other sorts of projects, as you said, that you'll be focusing on that, but you can't neglect the rare earths as we highlighted.
No.
So
and we're doing the same process right now at Kirikara. So we've got we had a heritage survey planned about a month ago. Unfortunately, there was a death in the community, so it was postponed.
No, yeah.
But that's going to start the 1st of October. All right. So
That's soon as well then. Yeah.
2 weeks, and I'll be up there for that survey, and I'll be up there for a week with the team, and then I'll be doing some reconnaissance myself, rock chip sampling around that rare earth sample that we got, and but also just inspecting and making sure, re-looking at the areas that we're actually planning to do a couple of diamond holes, which we plan to start. I'm hoping about before the end of October. Now that the timing of that will be based on
a lot of other variables
from the heritage survey.
Of course.
But that heritage survey will clear not only areas for the immediate drilling, it's going to clear areas for potential RC drilling. All right, if the rare earth target comes up, if we get good results from the diamond drilling, we want to go in and do RC. So we're getting that cleared now. But also some other areas where we've identified some similar targets, IOCG/carbonatite pipe-like targets, for some ground geophysics, right? Because we want to get a bit more of a handle about what those targets mean, if they're legitimate, and whether we should go in and drill test them. So it's an important survey, but that then's going to give us a runway to do a fair bit of work over the next 6 to 12 months.
That's a good segue to that project as well, because that's another, as you said at the outset, quite an important project and development there. So if we're almost going through the same lens of what that area is like, where it is, and some of the historical work that's been done there. I mean, what has been so intriguing about this area, and almost the rare earth component? How did that all really start fluttering into Rincon Resources?
Look, West Arunta. Did I say Kiwikara earlier? I mean,
yes,
it has been known and referred to as the Kiwikara project, but it's
I didn't give it an attempt at saying it, because I always feel I'm going to botch it.
And for that reason, because it seems to become across as a bit of a tongue twister.
Yes.
We're just going to refer to it as the West Arunta project.
West Arunta. That's a bit nicer. Yeah, I was looking at it and I didn't want to botch the pronunciation.
People investors, are familiar with West Arunta.
Yeah.
So it made sense, and so we'll continue from here on. I've got to get used to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's helpful for me, and for I can assume a lot of others.
As the West Arunta project.
Beautiful.
But the project itself has a prospect called Perkali, and that's been known about for a long time. In fact, the founding director of Rincon was the geologist who drilled the early holes at Perkali for a company called Ashburton Minerals. And so, obviously, retaining the knowledge and excitement at that time.
When was that, roughly?
So that would have been early 2000s.
Yeah, so
early to mid 2000s.
Fair time ago in some regards, but
well, it was, but not that long ago. And I think the story goes that due to an administrative error, Ashburton Minerals lost title to the ground. All right. And so, I don't know, it became difficult, and they just said, we're just going to get out and we'll move on, right?
Yeah.
But someone picked up that ground, as they do, and this Geo, the founding director, he was aware of that, and then eventually
always kept it in the back of his mind.
Absolutely, and good projects are sometimes grabbed like that, and then did a deal to get it, and that's how it's come back into Rincon. So we have we had in-house knowledge, and have in-house knowledge of the history of Perkali in particular and the project. And, some of at the time, and it's been well documented even by us, that, the Perkali is an outcropping system. It's a big hill. But there's just a significant amount of outcropping veins and structures that carry, high amounts, good grades of copper and gold, and indeed silver, platinum, palladium. It's
a whole host of minerals.
It's a polymetallic system, but it's also, it's an IOCG system, right? But it's carrying a lot of different metals. Okay, and in the area that's been explored so far, there's also background levels of rare earths, as you'd expect in an IOCG is an iron ore copper gold system.
Beautiful.
For those who don't know,
yes, good.
In an IOCG system, so So the rare earths were always there, but just not in any sort of level of abundance that got us excited earlier on until WA1
Yes.
made their discovery. All right. And so WA1 made that discovery, I wouldn't say it was by accident. They were actually testing a target for IOCG.
As we're sort of encountering a bit more and more now.
Exactly the same style and type of signature that Picali pushes out in the geophysics. They targeting the same. In fact, the geophysicists, I believe, at the time working on that and developed those targets and the drill holes to test the targets with the same geophysicists that worked with us and still do work with us on developing our drill targets for Picali, right? The diamond holes that we're going to be doing. And so, they went and put 1, 2, couple of holes in, and fortunately enough, this is where they are today, right? Major niobium discovery, carbonatite pipe, and now you got Encounter next door replicating similar success. Now, the good thing is that our project covers same geology in terms of age, type, same types of structures. It's a major crustal deformation zone. All right, big structures, deep mantle tapping structures. All right, these are big structures that bring up a lot of fluids and a lot of other stuff around it. Including these intrusives, bring up all these metals. So this is where these types of systems live. And so we always knew Picali was a ripper, but needs a lot more work. And the previous drilling demonstrated very wide zones of 0.3, 0.4% copper. So there was a lot of copper floating around, but never, they didn't intersect any real rich stuff. That's what we're going to try and test with the diamond. We want to get down deep below and try and find the source of all this copper that's sitting up near the surface. So in our efforts to further understand geology, structure, we went out and did some mapping, sampling, a lot of sampling. And just by chance, one rock chip that I picked up that just looked a little bit different to the other stuff we were collecting had a massive enrichment in rare earths, almost in every element 10 times more than abundance.
It's fair enough.
The average mantle abundance. And so the GA who was doing the mapping at the time, Dr. Carl Brohart, he's a very smart fella, he said, mate, it's
quite good.
Yeah,
quite
you stumbled onto something that's really interesting. It's we couldn't really put a fingerprint on whether it was carbonatite or not because it was missing some phosphorus and some other elements that should be there to confirm that. But all the other indicators suggest that this is from a carbonatite source, or and it might just be a little bit of shoot off and that's come off it, and potentially altered with subsequent events, and it's lost some of those other elements. And so I obviously got excited. So we spoke to a lot of people, and the consensus was, this is definitely from carbonatite. So
got to do your due diligence. You have
to make sure. You can't just get excited about something that the facts don't back up, right?
Yeah.
So this is a great sign for us to have potentially an IOCG with carbonatite mineralisation rare earths next to each other, all right? And it's not out of the question because they all come up the same. They're all related to the same types of systems and stuff like that. So, that's just to have them next door potentially. Is
it's a nice prospect to have.
That's pretty exciting. So, look, the work that I'm going to do when I go up for this heritage survey is to go back to where I got that sample. Take some more samples in that area and see if I can just say, okay, well, we've got it there, now we've got it here, there, here.
Start getting a really good picture.
Increase the knowledge and the facts and say, okay, well, that's all pointing to this direction. Let's drill here. All right. And as I said, we're going to be doing a bit more geophysics over Picali, some high resolution stuff. That should hopefully help us identify with a bit more precision about where to put, where to test that target if it comes up. So
well, and this is what I love, again, especially as we said at the outset, yourself being a geo almost, this is like the perfect almost story of going out there and actually knowing and realizing potentially what this is, because you could say, coming from a potential finance background, going into exploration, as some companies do, you sort of might have missed something like this, and you would almost say it's a fluke, it's a rarity, but this is almost the partnership of having someone that knows the rock area and the geology and can sort of understand a bit more, as opposed to the potential, the finance, the numbers, and that side of it, which is what I really like about geos running teams like this. And this feeds into, as we can see, a lot of activity coming, and it's almost a credit to the capital raise that you guys have done. And you can see already the funds from that is going to be allocated towards a lot of these projects. But I mean, going through that and successfully getting that away, firstly, congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, how enriching is that process been, and what can you really, I guess, elevate and get access to now that you've got a bit more funds to really do some of these programs and exploration?
The first thing is, it's going to allow us to do what we've been wanting to do for a long time.
Yeah, almost hamstrung as a small cap with limited resources.
Well, like I said, I mean, a lot of it has been delayed or put on hold because, as I said, the timing to actually, for some of these areas in particular, has taken time for us to get access. So there's no point raising money for activities you want to do but you can't do for several months, right? No one's going to give you money.
And it's
to
not
do
been
that.
a very forgiving or easy capital market recently as well.
So I guess we ran the gauntlet a little bit in waiting, and the share price obviously suffered because of that. But again, even if we did it earlier on, there would have been, well, what's happening? What are you doing with the money? How soon can you do it? And we're like, oh, well, we've still got to wait 6 months to get this and that. So, no one will give you money to do that. So we kind of were forced to wait a bit. And unfortunately, we did raise money. We raised a lot of money, which is good, but we raised at a price which is probably a little bit too low, in my view, clearly too low. But nonetheless, we've got the money. People believe, investors who put money in, clearly believe in the story. They understand and obviously like the strategy to explore and get the programs done. So we'll do that. And then hopefully success comes and we build on that, and we keep getting bigger and better.
Yeah, keeps going on to the next stage. And
that's the name of the game, right? Yeah. We want to make money for our shareholders. And the only way we're going to do that is through good exploration to make a discovery. That's the name of our game. That's our mission. And so that's what drives us. That's what drives me, is make a discovery.
Yeah, of course. And when you're saying, all of us, I can imagine that also means there's a few, and you touched on the board around you, but I can imagine the team has also been, as always, you need a good team and a bit of experience. And you said you're getting a bit of mentoring from potentially some of the other sides of the mining cohesion of, the rocks and the geo, but the finance side. But I mean, rounding out the team that you've got around you, I mean, who's been really quite influential and important in developing and getting this company to where it is?
There's no one person.
Yeah, exactly.
As a collective, the board is there, support. I mean, the board has a role for the company, but, we all have different inputs. So on the strategy, the money management, corporate management, all that kind of stuff. Clearly, that's the board, and that's where I get that, input from. From a technical perspective, I draw on connections I have with
the industry,
really smart people. Right, there's a high-level educated people, doctors, masters of science, all that kind of stuff. But people who just generally had a lot of industry experience beyond my years, who have seen more. Who have achieved discovery success, have done different parts of areas that, I'm probably going to get into as well, that I haven't done. But there's no point in having an isolated view of things. You need a balanced view. And the only way you can do that, I think, is to draw on other ones and then, say, okay, I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
What if I do that? There's always different ways of doing things.
Fresh perspectives and
you need that.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, I think you suffer.
Stagnant and
yeah. And look, I'm not an expert in any one particular field, and so for me, it's critically important that that's the way I operate. And it's good. Everyone gets excited.
Yeah, I can imagine. And given what you've got in this project package, there's a fair bit of excitement, and now having the money and combined with the work that's been leading up to this, you could almost say that balancing act of, can we get there? And that's the sort of stresses that everyone in your position would go through, is can we actually get to that next stage? And it's a very, very competitive and tough industry to really thrive. And when you make that discovery, like boom, you're away, as we've seen with quite a few recently. But you mentioned there's the last project, and some, I guess, the future plans is to potentially look at options to do things with that. And that sort of feeds into, I mean, what can really everyone, investors or just people that are following the company, expect over the coming 6 to 12 months across the board, and potentially with all three projects? What's going through your mind and the team's mind?
Well, look, I mean, there's a clear strategy to test the targets we've got at both projects. Now, they're either going to be successful and lead to a discovery, or they won't.
Now that's the reality of everything in this.
But the board's role is to continue to evaluate, the time value of money and the opportunity. You can't just keep spending something on something, for the sake of it.
Yeah.
You have to start getting some rewards or indications. Otherwise, you're like, well,
why do we have it?
Do we then say we can't afford to spend more money on that? Do we farm it out, or do we sell it, or do we? You've got to come to a decision about that at some point in time. Otherwise, you just run out of money. You die a slow death. And that's something we've been doing at Laverton. Right, we've spent a fair bit of money there, and we got to a point where we think, well, we don't think the opportunity at Laverton is
warrants
as good as Telfer or Kiriko at this point. So, we should rotate, shift one out, bring one in. That might happen at the other projects as well.
Yeah.
In time. And so that it's sort of merging acquisitions, joint ventures, sales, whatever. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
And if a company's not really doing that, then, you're not really
doing anything.
Shareholders,
exactly.
To be honest.
Exactly.
Because no one wants you to spend all your money on that and then
just let it sit there.
What happens after that, right?
Yeah.
Where's my money go? So that's
what's going through the
that's
minds.
An interesting part of the business.
Yeah. No, of course, and I think that's a good thing for investors and just followers to understand that, because a lot of these exploration companies, you have so much area, and when you talk about kilometers. When you actually think about that from a logistical point of view, if you're standing in the middle, you can't see the boundaries in some of these areas because it's just such a huge package of land. You think there's potentially such an abundance, but where do you start and how do you keep all that on your books? And I think people get lost, especially sitting in Perth in Western Australia. We're the most isolated city in the world, and you've got to drive hours before you can get anywhere. If you compare that to other countries, it's completely different. But from a mining point of view, there's just so much land that you need to prioritize and find out what your targets are and everything. It's just...
Well, I mean, and this is the interesting thing about this West Australian Mining Act, right? It's basically use it or lose it. They give you an opportunity to, have a piece of ground to explore, and they say, all right, we'll give you 6 years to explore, and you've got to spend this much money on it and pay this much rent and all this kind of stuff. And then, and you can apply to extend for another period, all right? But generally, you've got to have a reason to do that. So
they're not just going to do it
if you haven't
because
done anything on that lease, they won't let you extend. So you lose it. If you've done enough to warrant further investigation, then they say, okay, we'll give you another 6 years and so forth, right? But there's always a time limit. So you can't just house.
You can't just sit in your hands. Yeah.
So you're forced to acquire, evaluate, test, and then make a decision one way or another. If you've done a test and you can't see potential for what you're looking for, you move it on.
Yeah.
Right. And so, in that regard, you're constantly evolving, regardless, right? But in terms of finding a good project, There's a few things to consider. I mean, one, obviously you want good geology, good structure. You want to know that what you're looking for, that there's an opportunity to find that in that space. But then what happens if you find a major discovery? What's the cost of developing such a thing? What do you need? How big does it need to be to put in the infrastructure that you'd need to develop it? Can you get it out? Where do you send it? How do you do that? This was some of the questions we faced, I guess, with West Arunta, right? Until WA1 made their discovery. And so on the back of that, and not only that, but there's another company next door called Agrimin. Agrimin are developing massive potash brine project on Lake Mackay. And so they've got plans to put in their infrastructure to mine that, truck it up to Kununurra. They're putting in a major road. All of a sudden there's
infrastructure being built and accessibility improving.
There's potentially accessible infrastructure for access, at least. And depending what happens with WA1, if that goes to a decision to mine, right? And a lot of this based on economics and timing. If it's warranted, it's economic. If that happens, all of a sudden there might be a processing mill and some more infrastructure and baseload power, right? It all starts to make that area more accessible.
And de-risks the entire area as well.
Absolutely. There's de-risking, brings down any potential cut-off grades that you need to work to, because you don't have to, someone's done that, you don't have to do that. You just have to negotiate to share it, if possible. You monitor things like that all the time, and you've got to make sure. I mean, Telfer's similar, given it's remote, but the Telfer gold mine itself has all that infrastructure in place. But importantly, it's got a really hungry mill, which needs wants more feed. And that's why Telfer for us is a really good opportunity, because anything we find,
it's already got a home really wanting
bottom
it.
dollar, I know where it's going.
And
all we would need to do is put in trucking access or haul road access to mine it and deliver it.
And I think that's very important because
Newcrest want to buy it. Right? So there's a couple of extra strategies there.
And as we're noticing the almost direction of mining exploration now, given the tailwinds of how much we need to uncover, and that's a whole other podcast in itself, of the looming supply versus demand picture and a lot of these critical minerals, a lot of the discoveries need to come in areas that potentially haven't necessarily been developed or infrastructure. They're not going to be those really accessible areas. I think that's, you could say, reality has already been taken up or absorbed or under production, and it's now that next stage of end of life. So the new discoveries are going to be in those areas where infrastructure and accessibility is going to be built into it. And that's just the beauty of this next stage of life that we're facing in the mining development in Australia and almost across the world. But for listeners that are trying to follow and stay on top of Rincon, because I can see a fair bit of news and activity coming out, and there'll be some exciting news, hopefully, and just lots of activity. Where can listeners and viewers go to follow the company and stay on top of all the announcements coming out?
Oh, look, we've got a pretty good presence on LinkedIn, Twitter. We regularly put out announcements and a bit of news here and there, but the website's the main thing. Call me direct. My number's public, my email's public. I'm here to talk to anyone who wants to know more about Rincon. Of course, ASX News. That's obviously when we've got something to disclose, announcements and results, it's all going to go through ASX News. So I urge you to, if it's not on your watch list,
exactly,
on any of those platforms, then put us on there. But look, we'll have news leading up to starting drilling, probably during drilling, post drilling, and then we'll start to get assays and results towards the back end of this year. So there's another a reason to
follow.
Yeah,
of course.
And that'll go into early next year with diamond drilling and all that kind of stuff to come up. I think with diamond drilling, I said we'd start late October. So I can see the next 6 months being really quite busy. They might be a little bit slow over Christmas time because the location of our projects.
Everyone wants a break.
Well, I mean, you simply can't operate.
Of course, seasonality. Yes.
It's just way too hot. So there'll be a bit of a pause, but results will still come in. So there'll be some news or technical news. And then hopefully from probably February, March onwards, we restart our season. We're doing some geophysics work at West Toronto.
There we are, yep.
And but we're also, look, at the same time, and I've failed to mention so far, is that at Telfer we've also got another ripping target called Recurve, which we're right now talking to the Aboriginal community about getting access for a survey. So the Recurve, unfortunately, is in an area where there's zero access.
It's bush bashing almost in a way.
We've got to put in an access, but we've got to cross several dunes. So that's all delicate.
Yeah.
And so that's going to take time, and this time of the year, coming into law time, where, the Martu Native Title Party, they don't do anything between November and probably March. So if we don't get our survey done before November, we're going to have to wait until
next year sometime. Okay.
That's, we want to get things done straight away.
Yeah,
but unfortunately that's the law we live by at the moment.
Yeah.
But that's what we're working on. So then there's recurve drilling that will happen next year, and that'll probably be one of the first programs we do if we go ahead with that. And then obviously results will determine what happens after that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the next stage of the company's...
That's the next stage, right? And that's, we continually review and assess. And but look, not only that, as I said, we'll probably be looking for a project, a lithium project. I'm looking at several at the moment.
And that will be also fluttering through the ASX announcements as well.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
But, that's...
All depends if it all goes to plan.
That's what's happening, right? So, like I said, we're trying to take labour and move labour and bring something in. I've started looking at that opportunity and how and what that might look like.
No, fantastic. There's a lot happening, and I appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. It's the first time we've spoken and the first time on the podcast. So I hope you enjoyed yourself. I think there was a fair bit to dissect there, and I hope audiences appreciate that. But thank you, Gary, for speaking with me on the show today. And it's going to be an exciting period of time. So I look forward to seeing the updates come through, and hopefully have you back in coming months or in the new year to see what's really unfolding. So thank you so much, Gary.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow The Market Bull on our socials at Twitter and LinkedIn by searching The Market Bull. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on the website by visiting www.themarketbull.com.au.